This video is about the plasma membrane and ways that cells transport molecules into and out of the cell. This picture is showing you the plasma or cell membrane. The plasma membrane is found in all cells. Remember, it's one of the four things that is common between every single cell on Earth, a plasma or a cell membrane. It is the outside boundary that separates the inside of the cell from the outside. The plasma membrane controls what enters and exits the cell. It is made up of phospholipids, which is a type of lipid, and proteins. If you look at this picture here, do you see all these yellow squiggly things? Those are all phospholipids. Notice it's in two layers. It separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. There's also these purple blobs inside the phospholipids. These purple blobs are the proteins. The proteins help really big molecules move in and out of the cell. The plasma membrane is special because it only allows some molecules into and out of the cell. This is why the plasma membrane is called selectively permeable. Selectively permeable means that only some molecules can get through the cell membrane. Not every single thing can go in and out of the cell, only some molecules. I just said that molecules can move through the plasma membrane and enter or exit a cell. The way that molecules move through the plasma membrane is called diffusion. Diffusion is when molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration until they reach equilibrium. Look at the animation in the top right. We have a bottle of perfume. There's lots of perfume molecules inside that bottle, and when you lift off the top, the molecules move from inside the bottle, which has a high concentration of perfume molecules, to outside the bottle. It's moving from a high concentration to a low concentration until it reaches equilibrium. What is equilibrium? Equilibrium simply means equal, until the concentration on either side is equal. When you put a lump of sugar into a beaker or a glass of water, diffusion happens. All of these sugar molecules, when you put them in, are originally in a high concentration. They're all together. And then they move out throughout the water. You might call it disperse, you might call the sugar moving, but really the scientific world would call it diffusion. Molecules are moving from a high concentration to a low concentration until they have equaled out. Diffusion requires no energy for molecules to move from a high concentration to a low concentration. It happens automatically. It does not need any ATP. Let's practice this concept. Which direction will the molecules move? So let's pretend this is two cells. I know it doesn't look like it, but let's pretend. There's a cell on the right and there's a cell on the left, and they're split by a plasma membrane, which is the outside border of the cell. Notice on the right we have, I'm just guessing, like 10, 12 yellow dots, and over here we have 6 yellow dots. If the yellow dots represent molecules, which side has a higher concentration of yellow dots? The left side or the right side? The right side. The right side has a higher concentration. Diffusion is the movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration. So these yellow molecules will move from the right side to the left side. That's diffusion. All you need to know is which direction will the molecules move. It always goes from a high concentration to a low concentration. What about this picture? This is a little tougher. Let's pretend this balloon here is actually a cell and it's covered in a plasma membrane. Inside the cell has a concentration of molecules of 0.05. Outside the cell there's a concentration of molecules of 0.03. Therefore, which one is the higher number? Which has a higher concentration? Inside. Therefore, the molecules will move from inside the cell to outside the cell. Last one. Which direction will the molecules move? They will move to the right because there's a higher concentration on the left, a lower concentration on the right. So remember that diffusion is the movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration. Once the molecules move, they eventually reach equilibrium, which means that molecule concentration is equal on both sides. Once this happens, the molecules continue to move, but they now move equally in both directions. Here's the last practice problem. Which direction will the molecules move? So let's pretend there's 0.6 of a concentration of molecules on the outside, 0.2 on the inside. It looks like there's a higher concentration outside, 0.6, versus inside the cell, 0.2. So the molecules will move in. They always move from high to low. Which direction will the molecules move here? High to low, which is into the cell. Which direction will the molecules move? Looks like the concentration is equal. If it's equal, the molecules move in both directions equally. Which direction will the molecules move? Out of the cell, because it's higher inside the cell than outside of the cell, so the molecules will move out. Which direction will the molecules move? Into the cell. Finally, why are we talking about diffusion? Well, molecules in our body are constantly diffusing from outside of our cells into our cells, or vice versa. Every time you breathe, you inhale oxygen into your lungs, and then the oxygen diffuses from your lungs through your lung cells and into your bloodstream. The concentration of oxygen in your lungs is high, and the concentration in your blood is low. So oxygen diffuses from your lungs into your blood. That's diffusion. Besides diffusion, there are 3 other ways that molecules move into and out of your cells. The first way is called osmosis. Osmosis is exactly the same as diffusion, but instead of just any random molecule moving, osmosis only applies to water. So when water moves from a high concentration to a low concentration until it reaches equilibrium, that's called osmosis. Here's another example. This is showing you a tube separated by an artificial membrane. Let's pretend this is a plasma membrane in the middle. The purple dots represent molecules, and the blue liquid in the background is just water. Look at the 2 sides of the test tube. The left side has less molecules, less purple dots, than the right side. So the left side has more water. I'm going to say that again. Because it has less purple molecules, there is more room for water. So the left side has a higher concentration of water than the right side. Therefore, we know that water moves from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water, which means the water will move to the right of the tube. That is exactly what happens. Water moved from a high concentration to a low concentration, and it moved to the right. Another way molecules can move through the plasma membrane is called facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion is when big molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration, but because they are so big, they can't fit through the plasma membrane, so they have to go through a protein. This picture is showing facilitated diffusion. These molecules, these yellow dots here, are representing big molecules. They cannot fit through these phospholipids of the plasma membrane, so instead they have to go through a protein. This is why it's called facilitated diffusion and not just diffusion. Normal diffusion is when molecules can go straight through the plasma membrane, straight through the phospholipids. But big molecules need help, and to facilitate means to help. So what helps them move through the plasma membrane are these proteins. So big molecules moving through proteins from a high concentration to a low concentration is called facilitated diffusion. The final way molecules move through the plasma membrane is called active transport. Active transport is the exact opposite of diffusion. Did you hear me? The exact opposite of diffusion. It's the movement of substances from a low concentration to a high concentration using a protein. We just learned in diffusion that it went from high to low without a protein. Active transport, since it's the opposite of diffusion, goes low to high with a protein. This process requires ATP. It requires energy. Whenever you see a diagram of molecules moving from a low concentration to a high concentration using ATP, it must be active transport. Here's an example of active transport. Notice these hydrogen ions are being pumped into this extracellular fluid. And in this case, it might be talking about your stomach or something. The way that you know this is active transport is notice there's a low concentration of hydrogen here, a high concentration of hydrogen here, so it's going low to high. And the big clue that this is active transport is this ATP molecule. Whenever you see ATP as part of something moving, it must be active transport. Here's another picture. Low to high with ATP must be active transport. Here's a nice summary of 3 out of the 4 types of molecule transport. This picture is not showing you osmosis. It's showing you diffusion, which is the first one we learned, high concentration to low concentration, no energy is required, and no protein is required. Osmosis we skipped. Facilitated diffusion is the movement of molecules from a high concentration to a low concentration with the help of a protein. Active transport is the exact opposite. It goes from a low concentration to a high concentration with the use of ATP. Write down your questions and ask me in class.